Welcome to I'm Spiritual But, starring the award-winning author and actress Anne Scottlin and globally renowned speaker and award-winning author Dr. Roger Leslie. I'm Spiritual But is a one-of-a-kind talk show about inclusive spirituality for religious and non-religious people alike. It's our vision to inspire everyone to discover their own unique spiritual experience. Email us at hello@imspiritualbut.com. We'd love to hear from you, or if you have a guest to recommend for the show. Thank you to USA Global TV, to our sponsors, and to all of you for spreading the word. And now, Anne Scottlin and Dr. Roger Leslie.
Hi, welcome back to I'm Spiritual But. I'm Anne Scottlin, and this is my wonderful co-host, Dr. Roger Leslie. And we're so glad you joined us again today to talk about inclusive spirituality. Also, please do like and subscribe on USA Global TV Network. You'll see that's probably what you're watching this on, or you can find it if you're on an audio platform. You can search it online as well. Good morning, Roger.
Good morning, Anne. How are you today?
I am good. I am good. I am blessed. How has your week been?
Wonderful. We had a family wedding this weekend, so we had family in from out of town and got to see some relatives we haven't seen in a while. It's just been glorious.
Oh, that's
How about yours?
Amazing. Yes, it's been very good. I'm up in the mountains right now, and it's been snowing. So, but it's absolutely beautiful. Just here in like a tall cedar and pine forest. It's really magical, and watching the deer. So peaceful. But I'm leaving later today for Washington, D.C., so I get to go hang out in the city.
That's exciting.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to it. I'm speaking there. So, Roger, do you want to remind our guests and viewers the purpose of the show, or in your own words?
Sure. So, the purpose of our show, as I think is the purpose of all life, is just to reflect the light for each other. And so in the course of doing this show, we just want to reflect the viewer's light so that you can make your own dreams come true, and so that you can more profoundly follow your own spiritual path, whatever that is. Whether you stay with a traditional route that you grew up with, whether you found something unique and different, whether it has no resemblance at all to what you grew up with or the people you love are following. We just want you to just trust yourself, trust your soul, and know that wherever you're heading, it's the best place for you. So trust it.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much. And we have a wonderful guest for you today. I've actually been looking forward to having her on for quite some time now. It's going to be Samantha Adams. She and I had a lot to relate to when we first talked. And I can't wait for the conversation we're going to have today. You're going to want to stick around because she's amazing. So yes, please welcome Samantha Adams.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Hi, Sam. It is so good to see you. I'm so excited to see you. And just for our viewers, just a little summary of Sam. Sam is a professional marketer, has her own business, very ambitious woman. She came from an extremely conservative religious background, more on that later. And tough for someone, a young person, had cancer in 2021, which really changed the direction of her spiritual experience, her journey, and led her to some new spiritual awakening and awareness. And I can't wait to talk to you about that. But first, Roger, I think you have her quote.
And I love it, Sam. You're so succinct. Even your quotation is just so to the point. I just love it. And her quotation that she chose for our discussion today is a Zen proverb that says, "Let go or be dragged." Tell us the background on that particular proverb. Why did it touch your soul?
Yeah, I think that life has a very funny way of getting me to learn lessons, and it's usually just thrashing me to rock bottom until I pay attention to what it's trying to tell me. And over the course of my life, I can pinpoint different areas where I just couldn't let go. I just couldn't let go of the situation. I couldn't let go of my feelings or let go of my worry for the future. And I came across this quote. It's just, let go, or you're going to be dragged along for something that probably wasn't for you anyway. And so when I feel myself starting to get anxious or starting to worry, this proverb really is just let go, babe, let go or be dragged. It's going to be so much easier and calmer for you if you just let it go. So I tell myself this probably on a daily basis, honestly.
I love that. And how does it tie in with your spiritual journey? If you would just succinctly give us a little history of your spiritual journey and where this quotation was a pivotal point for you.
Yeah, so I grew up in a very well-to-do, very, very ingrained Mormon household in Utah County, Utah. So like the Zion Mecca of Mormonism. And, you know, just never really had a problem with it growing up, but never really resonated with it. It just couldn't connect with the messages that people were saying. They had these big, profound spiritual experiences. And I never felt that way. And so I ended up getting married in the LDS temple when I was 19. Still had no idea who I was, what I wanted to do in life, as no one really at 19 does. And so in my early 20s, I started, you know, figuring that out, what I like, what I don't like, and ended up leaving the church because it just didn't sit well with me. Had kind of a religious, spiritual falling out where I didn't believe in a higher power, didn't believe in God, kind of just was really angry for a couple years there. And after, you know, my mid 20s, I got diagnosed with stage 2 cervical cancer when I was 25. And that really, I think, was the pivotal moment for me in my life where I was like, oh no, I could not have as much time as I think I do to really figure out what matters and who I love and what I want to do and what I don't want to do. So it just put a lot of things into perspective for me. All these little things I was worrying about, stopped worrying about them, you know, kind of shifted my focus and really thought, what do I want to leave behind if this is it for me at 25? So luckily, thank heavens to modern medicine and those amazing doctors, I was able to get a full hysterectomy just over a year ago, and I'm in full remission now, which is really exciting. But there was nothing I could do about that. If it was my time, it was my time. And so this quote, let go or be dragged, really was like, okay, you can do nothing but move forward right now, sis. Like, you've got no other choice. And so I really had no choice but to kind of just surrender to the universe. And that was like, okay, well, what kind of universe do I want to surrender to? What touches me? And so that kind of led this whole journey of figuring out what kind of energy and power I believe in. It's not necessarily the God that Mormonism puts in a box, but it's more of like an expansive oneness and universal energy. But yeah, I would say that cancer was probably the pivotal moment for me.
Wow. That's incredible. What a story. And there's so many things that I would love to delve into. First though, just backing up. So near the beginning of your story, I'd love to hear more. When you did walk away from your church, which, and as everyone who watches this show knows, we're not pro or against anything. Different things work for different people, but we're also looking at exploring where people, when they've struggled, where they have found connection spiritually. So when you walked away, what was that time like? Was there doubt? Were you questioning whether you were spiritual or not? What was going on with you and your mind and everything at that point?
Oh, that was such a tumultuous time in my life, man, because I wanted to believe them. Everyone in my family is still a member of the church. It's still so prominent in my whole life. And everyone's like, oh, you just wanted the easy way out. You just wanted, you know, to not have to make these commitments to God or go to church. And I remember sitting in my bathtub. I take baths to like center myself almost every day, just sobbing because I was like, what if they're right? And I don't believe it. I just feel it in my bones. It doesn't sit right with me. And so I finally made the choice at the end of the day, like, I have to be authentic to who I am and what I'm feeling. And so it's okay that my family, I mean, I love and support them. I want them to go to church. I love they have that community, but it just wasn't for me. And it was very isolating. It was really, really hard to tell these people who raised me, who so deeply connect with this religion, that I don't believe in their lifestyle. It was horrible. Like it was such a test of my identity and my character, really.
What I love, Sam, is that you've so clearly delineated, though, that lifestyle was not a good fit for you, but you still honor that it could absolutely be a perfect fit for them. And you are honoring them on their spiritual journey as they continue forward, even as you explore yours. Along that journey, when you made that switch, were there role models for you, either in person or that you read about, that inspired you to think, I can find my own way? There are people who do this, and this might work for me, thanks to their insights or leadership.
Yeah, that's a great question. Therapy was huge. I've been in therapy since I was 20, and really, because coming from such a contrasting religious background, I really needed a non-involved third party to help me even figure out what my internal dialogue was saying, instead of just being so impressed on by the people around me. And I appreciate you saying I've made the difference now between them having religion and me having my own, but it was not always that way. I was really angry for a long time at whatever God was up there and making me feel different. And it was actually a book that I read only about a year and a half ago. It's called A Return to Love. Yeah. I was so mad at the concept of God for so long. And this book really helped me realize that God is just what we're all talking about, just in different verbiage, and just how we connect with it. It's just that religion's God. It's probably the same as mine, but just different spheres.
And that's Marianne Williamson, right?
Yes. Yeah.
That's
phenomenal.
amazing.
Yeah, I love her. It was a really great paradigm shift for me, that real love and acceptance is not just accepting me and my ideals and doing what's true to me, but allowing people to do the same, because it has no direct impact on me. If you want to go to Mormon church, go to a Mormon church. I love that for you. That's just not what I'm going to be doing.
Yeah. And so, and you and I had so much in common when we first talked also, because not only did we have similar, not the same backgrounds, but also got married very young and then divorced. So how did that go down with you and the church, and how did that relationship, or the end of that relationship, sort of affect how you felt spiritually?
Thankfully, my ex-husband and I left the church at the same time. So religion wasn't a huge factor in that separation, but growing up so religious, divorce isn't something you really talk about or even entertain, really. And so when I was 23 and like, I think I need to get a divorce, it was just, I was so scared to talk about it. I was so scared to say, this is what I really need. And it was met with a lot of resistance from family members. And it was definitely a trying time in more ways than one. But I think I went a little dark. I went into my hermit phase a little bit when that happened, because my whole life got stripped away from me. I moved out of my home. I had to leave my dogs with him. I lost all my friends. Like, I moved back in with my dad. You know, it was truly square one, restart. And I think I needed that, because I needed a very open space to re-figure out who I was anyway. But you grow up thinking that you are all of these things given the society you grew up with. And I wasn't any of those things. I was like, I don't even know who this girl is staring at me in the mirror anymore. And it took a long time to really get to know her again. But I think I needed that clean slate to really dive deep into that journey.
Did your dad remain a lifeline throughout the journey?
Yeah. Oh, it's going to get me emotional if we talk about my dad. I showed up on his doorstep with a randomly packed duffel bag at like 11 o'clock at night. And all I said was, I think I need to stay here for a minute. And for context, my parents got divorced about 3 years before I got divorced. And so when I showed up at his house, I just walked in and I started sobbing in his arms on the floor. And he kind of held me up and he said, I would go through my divorce 10 times over if it meant I could be here for you right now. And then we just sobbed together for like 3 hours.
What a good man. My goodness.
Yeah, man, he is a true example of unconditional love and support. Because when I told him I left the church, it was like, okay, and I love you. And I was like, oh wow, I was not expecting that. But of course now, I mean, I would expect nothing less from him. He's the best.
It's just so amazing, and such a good example of we don't realize how even the somewhat small things that we do, even intuitively, like he did then for his daughter, okay, and you always, I get emotional so easily, you know me, but was, you know, it was intuitive and instinctual for him, but like the lifelong difference that made for you, you know, and I've had similar experiences in my life where just knowing that someone loved you unconditionally, regardless of your creed, your philosophy, your religion, your, you know, like just human to human. To you, does that feel like part of the essence of a true spiritual experience?
Yeah, I think true spirituality is just being able to say, I see you, right? I'm not trying to change you. I'm not trying to mold you into something that I want you to be. It's just, I love you and for existing, and I love your presence in my life. And I grew up in a space where it was very performative. You get good grades, you do well in sports, you go to school, you know, it was just a very structured, you get married, you have kids, you have the white picket fence house and dream that everybody says they want. And I had all of that, and I just, it wasn't hitting the same. And so I think that now I'm probably more religious now than I was growing up being involved in Mormonism. And I'm sure people look at me now who grew up with me just going, what on earth is happening here? Because I meditate every day and I, you know, do mantras and do yoga. And I'm just this very woo-woo girl. I've changed a ton in the last, you know, 8 years. But the biggest difference for me is when you grow up Mormon, you want everyone else to be that religion because you think you're the top 1% getting into like the celestial kingdom and all of these things in the afterlife. And now just do your thing, babe. Be happy. I don't care what you're doing or where you're going as long as you're happy. And that peace and letting go in my life has been so freeing.
So I think that's so powerful, Sam. So I'm wondering, how did you make that transition in yourself to go from this idea that I have something that only 1% has and I want other people to share it, to realizing, oh, we might all be able to find our own version of it? How do we help viewers reframe their thinking so we have more of a live and let live? I'm on my journey, you're on yours. Let's support each other.
Yeah.
What worked for you?
Wonderful question. Again, this has all been a culmination of some extremely painful and tedious self-work that I have been doing since my divorce. And my partner and I, we have this thing called the common denominator theory, where if you look at all of the situations in your life that have been less than ideal, what's the one common denominator in that? And it's you as a person. And so we always say, like, well, the only thing you can truly control is how you respond and react to things. You really can't spend your time worrying about what everyone else is doing. And if you look at Mormonism, their message is to spread the word, right? They have missionaries that go out on these missions for 2 years and proselyte and go door to door and share the message because they love it. And it's very performative. They seek it out. And when I realized that the common denominator in my life in all of these tumultuous situations was me, I was like, I have to go inward and I have to be comfortable here. And that energy will radiate out to where it needs to go. I don't need to force it on anyone. And so it was really just this concept of radical surrender and letting go, but filling my own cup before I can ever think about filling anybody else's. And I tend to just say, well, you can fill your own cup and then love pours from the overflow. So it was really taking care of myself first, which I wasn't doing. I was totally putting myself on the back burner because I wasn't living authentically.
Wow. Well, let's talk about cancer. That's a really shocking thing to have when you're, 23, 24, 25 years old. And how did that impact you and how did you cope, especially at the beginning?
The Reader's Digest version of that story is I had a partner that was unfaithful. So I was just going in for a routine checkup and they ended up finding cancer. So many pieces to pick out from just that little part of the story. But you really, again, you cannot control what anyone else is doing. The only thing you can worry about is yourself. And so you always think that won't happen to me. I've been an athlete my entire life. I am very healthy. I take care of my body. And so this concept that I had something in my body that could potentially kill me was so weird to come to terms with. And I got very lucky. We went in for an exploratory surgery because there was some tissue they couldn't quite figure out what it was, and they just wanted to make sure that everything was kosher. And they ended up opening me up, and there was too much. My entire uterus was just crusted in cancer. And so they decided to make the choice to just take everything out, which ultimately saved my life. But then at 26, I can't have children, which is another huge piece of the Mormon culture that I had growing up, where your job as a woman is to have children, to have a family. And now I can't even do that naturally. And so I had this huge grieving process, which I never really wanted kids in the first place. Being mom wasn't my number one thing I wanted to do. But when that choice got taken away from me, it was shocking, the grief and the sadness that I felt of having to really recover there. And so that again was another piece of my spiritual journey where I had to sit down and say, what do you actually want? Because the universe gave you a second chance here, and you should take it, but you should do it the way you want to do it this time. And so it was really, let's get rid of everything that doesn't resonate and really focus on the things that do. So I ended up turning my career upside down, starting something completely new. So it was a Genesis moment for sure.
Wow.
And what drew you to your new direction in life? What did you decide, oh my gosh, if like all of us, if your time is limited here, how are you going to spend it? What made you decide to go the direction you went?
Yeah, I've always been really good at marketing. It's a talent I've had for a long time, but it's not my passion project, right? And I'm really good at motivating people and steering people. And so after my surgery, I was recovering. I was really depressed, and my partner looked at me and said, "You're not happy. I can tell you're not happy. What can we do here? Because you're kind of just existing, and we need to start making some progress so you don't dig yourself into a hole." And I was like, fair. He said, "What would you do if you could do anything in the whole world?" And I said, "I would be a life coach." Have no idea where it came from. Have no idea. I'd never said it out loud before, but from the day I said it out loud, 10 days later, I was enrolled in a program, an 8-month program for life coaching. And I just graduated in January.
Congratulations.
So, thank you. Certified professional life coach, but it specializes around energy work and energy blockages that we have from storing trauma in our body over the course of our life. And I've just learned that I have a very unique talent and passion for finding those blocks and helping people just let them go, because I had them for so long. But when you go through a program like that, you really become a student of your own progression, and you learn from your own past and trials and tribulations. And it made sense. And now, because I'm taking care of myself and doing things authentic to me, people are just finding me. Opportunities like this come up, and it's been really beautiful to see when you live passionately, what happens.
Oh, and so satisfying, when we're serving others in a way that really makes our lights come on. It's so exponentially rewarding. Like, we don't do it to get the reward. We do it because we love others, but it's just like the best thing. And it's just, the healthy habit comes back and just makes you glow. And I'm so excited that you're doing this now for other people. Absolutely amazing. So, and in your coaching and in what you're doing in teaching, you have some sort of alternative modalities that probably didn't resonate with your upbringing, as far as how you're helping people cope through things like hypnosis or NLP. Did you have any challenges around that when you first started working or getting certified in these things?
Yeah, old habits die hard, I'll tell you what. And I never really saw myself being one of these deeply spiritual woo-woo, hypnosis and all of these things, especially growing up so conservatively. And it takes a very brave and truthfully broken down soul to come to me and say, what I've been doing isn't working, and I need to try something else now. And so really all these modalities that we use are just tapping into your subconscious mind. Our conscious mind and the voice that lives inside our head is so tormented most of the time. If you pay attention to the dialogue upstairs, as me and my boyfriend say, the roommate that lives inside your head and narrates your day-to-day life can really get off track sometimes. And we can do our best to notice that and be aware. You know, meditation is a great practice for noticing the voice that lives in your head. But these deep-seated traumas, these deep-seated habits often are so deep they're in our subconscious. So there are plenty of ways that we can tap into that. You know, hypnosis is one, but deep guided meditation, sleep therapy. We also talk about cold exposure therapy a lot in my practice, which is really rewiring your entire nervous system response for when you get triggered into that fight or flight. So all of these alternative practices you don't talk about in Mormonism. You just don't. They're not really an option. And, you know, they don't even really drink. They don't drink tea. They don't drink coffee. They're very, very structured and restricted in the methods that they can use. And so I had to figure out what worked best for me outside of religion. And that took a while. I was trying different things, testing things, hating some things, loving some things, you know, but it was really healing to have the space for it to really decide, is this what I want? Instead of, is this what everyone else wants me to have?
As you were going through those different experiences, Sam, how did you assure that little voice inside of you that wanted to judge it all, that this was a healthy possibility for you? And even if some of the things didn't work, at least you tried them and you knew these weren't for you.
Yeah, I really embody, I call my holy Bible now, instead of the regular Bible, is The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. That book really was a game changer for me in being aware spiritually. He talks a lot about observing the voice inside your head. And so I will talk to her like, you're being so dramatic, or what are you so worried about? And so when we're trying these new modalities and we're testing something out for the first time, that fear of the unknown is what our head is going to focus on. So if we can retrain the voice in our head to say, we have no idea what's happening. How exciting. How cool does that sound? But that's not the typical way that society works right now. It's you need to know or you don't go kind of a thing. And so I think that's kind of why this kind of spirituality gets a bad rap, because we don't have all the answers. We're just really operating intuitively. And that scares the people who want data and numbers and hard facts, because they're operating from a place of secureness and we're operating from a place of trust.
And it's really true, you know, operating from a place of trust is counterintuitive to the way we all grew up, in the sense of we kind of learned to listen to that negative roommate in our head. I love that, the negative roommate. We all grew up listening to that, and we literally became, you know, it owns us when we let it out of control. It completely owns us. It controls our emotions. It controls our thoughts if we let them just run. It can then overflow into our health, mental, physical, emotional wellness, as well as spiritual wellness. So I love what you're sharing about this, because I find the spiritual experience is so deeply connected to our awareness. I think you would agree around awareness.
Yeah. And there's actually a biological explanation for that too. So in my coaching program, there are two different kinds of energy that we typically operate on, right? One is catabolic energy, which is the very angry, very destructive energy. It's the kind of energy that gets triggered when we're in our fight or flight response. And so our brain will dump cortisol and adrenaline into our body. So it has a direct effect. If we are constantly stressed and worrying and ruminating all the time, your brain is going to try to protect you, to get your body to either fight the threat or run away from it. And so if we're constantly living in this state of heightened cortisol and adrenaline, the physical ramifications of that are going to be very detrimental over a course of time. And so we talk about switching into anabolic energy, which is the creative, the flow, the I accept what happens and then I let it go. And that actually allows us to flush our systems of this destructive hormonal response that we get from being traumatized and triggered and, you know, living in a society that preys on working 150 hours a week and paying bills until we die, you know? So it's all about learning to recognize when we're in that, catabolic state, moving it to more of an anabolic state of being.
That's brilliant. And we may have to talk more about that sometime, because I know, I mean, I'm a case study right now, because a couple weeks ago, as some of my viewers know, I had a very traumatic experience. There's a shooting next door, and our neighbor killed his wife, and it was a really horrible experience, and so close to home and so involved. And so, even when you don't want to think about it, of course, it doesn't help. Every time I look out the window, the house is there, right? Every time you think about it, I feel my body tense up, right? Like it's so easy to like slide down. And I've noticed changes in my body in the last 2 weeks, like a lot of residual pain, inflammation, even weight gain, like these weird, nothing else has changed except this. And my response to, granted, that was trauma.
Yeah.
But I don't need to be controlled by my trauma, current or past. You can experience it and process it. You can get therapy. But learning how to use your mental and spiritual connection to give you freedom from that is an incredibly beautiful opportunity. So I just love what you're doing with that work.
Thank you. Yeah. So make sure that when you have these experiences, because if we live our life thinking that we're never going to experience trauma or hard things, then we're all going to live under a rock until we die. And the most important thing to remember is when our system does get triggered by these things, it's going to mimic how you felt when that happened, and it stores it in your body. And so the most important thing is to complete the cycle. Recognize that we're having those feelings. And yes, I acknowledge that this is happening and I feel it in my body. You know how dogs, when they're really tense after something happens, they'll shake it off and just walk away. That's releasing the tension and the trauma that their body is storing. And so you need to be aware of it and then let it go, whether that's going for a walk, really actually shaking it out, doing some dancing, but letting that energy out of your cells is so, so important, or your body is going to store it and repeat that pattern to where it becomes so intense that you don't put yourself in any situation to trigger it again.
My husband, Jerry, and I were in an experience many years ago where we were in our house when it was hit by a tornado and the roof was torn off.
Wow.
And we had never been through anything quite that traumatic to that point. But it was interesting how our bodies and our brains both responded differently in the long term, because Jerry developed a fear of flying, which he never had before. And I developed a fear of crime. I wouldn't go to the mailbox down at this corner of the street because I thought I was going to be mugged. I knew rationally I wouldn't, but our bodies were both processing the trauma and filtering it by transferring it to something else before we finally let it go. So the idea of how we deal with trauma is so fascinating, and it's probably different for everybody who goes through it. So there's really no way to anticipate and protect ourselves against how we're going to respond to trauma. But once we've gone through it, then we need to be proactive. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And I think that trauma is just circulating around social media and all these things right now. And everybody does experience trauma. It's not always trauma with the big capital T, but everyone does have these experiences. And the narrative right now is to not put yourself in situations where you could experience trauma. But how do we know how to do that? We don't. That's the silliest thing to ask people to do, because you never know what's going to happen even tomorrow. And so the rhetoric that I want to change for people is, you're going to experience this. Life is hard. We're going to experience hard and scary things. But if you can go into a situation and say, I know exactly how I respond to this, so I'm in charge of my actions when this does happen, you feel so empowered. And I think that's the story for a lot of people. Is I had a lot of trauma to work through, and I would get triggered and I would not handle it well. I would not respond well. I wouldn't process it well. And it ended up hurting people close to me because I couldn't get a grip on my responses and my reactions. And it finally took me saying, okay, I need to figure out how my brain and body operate so I can be in control when this happens again. And then I don't hurt people that I love. That was the true kind of genesis moment for me. Was I have been working too hard. I refuse to lose these things because I can't get a grip. And so it's not avoiding trauma. It's just learning so much about yourself that you know how to process it when it does come up. And the thing that changes is you'll still get triggered and you'll still have these responses, but the reaction time will be faster and the resolution time will be faster because, you know, okay, I felt this before. I'm going to see it. I'm going to acknowledge it. I'm going to do what I need, a breath work. I'm going to do a cold plunge. I'm going to take a walk. I'm going to do some yoga, whatever you need to do to let that process out. And then we just keep going about our day. You just get better at dealing with it.
I love that. And it's so true. I can even say for myself, you know, even, you know, depression runs in my family, and I experienced a lot, especially in my younger years. And creating those habits and awareness that would move me from being depressed for a year to a few months to a couple weeks to 3 days to sometimes being able to shake it off within a few hours instead of letting that control me indefinitely. So it does work, and it just takes consistent practice over time. But I wanted to ask you, so how do you connect then the spiritual aspect to this, to the mental work? And how do you reach out to connect to the spiritual? And how is that different from just meditating on, you know, your breathing? Or is it? How do you see it? Different or the same?
I think it's both, truthfully. Anyone that comes to me, because if you knew me in a past life, I was not even close to anything spiritual. And so people will notice, you know, my energy shift, or they'll see me, what I post on social media, and they'll ask me what's different. And every person I've ever interviewed on my podcast or for work has said the place that they started was journaling and meditating. To connect to your inner self. And so that's where I started. I've been a writer my whole life, so journaling made sense, but meditating was a tough one for sure. But really, spirituality for me, and what I tell people, is just how do you connect with the inner you that is dying to be seen and heard? And so I started with just meditation and journaling and kind of figuring out what that was. And then I found my way into, you know, oracle cards and tarot cards are a great way for me to connect with maybe my subconscious, or finding a message that I need to hear that day. And so a lot of people think there's a playbook. I can just buy a book at Barnes & Noble that will tell me exactly how I connect to the ether. And that's just it. That's the answer. The only person who knows is you. And so if you go figure out what really resonates with you deeply, you feel it in your bones and your cells, like, this feels right to me, explore that. How can you do that every day? For me, nature is a huge way that I connect with my spirituality. And so even if that's just taking my dog for a 15-minute walk in the morning, I clear out all the unnecessary shit, pardon my French, but like that allows me to focus on what really matters. For some people, it's painting. For other people, it's cooking. My partner is an amazing chef, and that time in the kitchen where he can really turn his mind off and just let his creativity flow is really important for his spirituality, because it allows him to connect with his authentic self. So there isn't a right or wrong answer, but if people are looking for a way to connect to that, journaling and meditating every day.
So for those, I'm sorry, Anne. So for those people who have not journaled before, or for those who have tried it and said, you know, I've tried it and I just feel like I'm boring myself because I just talk about what I do during the day. Do you have any tips for people who would like to start exploring that way that would help them get engaged in the process of journaling in a meaningful way?
Yeah, that's a great question. Sometimes a brain dump is just what you need. And if you have an expectation for your journal to be this manifesto, then maybe we need to look at that paradigm and shift it a little bit. When I first started journaling, I would just write until I had nothing to write about. And oftentimes it is still me just talking to myself about my day or past experiences. But what that does is it allows us to transfer what's going on in our minds onto paper to let it go if we need to let it go, instead of just ruminating and processing over things that might be bothering us. But another great thing I do every day when I journal is I list 5 things that I'm grateful for. Can be most of the time it's a warm cup of coffee in the morning, especially when it's not freezing outside right now. How does that make me feel? Why am I grateful for it? What am I looking forward to? I write my goals in my journal a lot too, because when you write them down, it makes them easier to achieve. And so really, like, world is your oyster when it comes to your journal. What do you want it to be? Do you want it to be something to keep you accountable? Do you want it to just be a diary where you can go back? I love reading back on my old journals. It is dramatic. And I love being like, man, remember when we thought that was the biggest deal in the whole world? And it's just not still, but it's such a fun record of my life. And so if you're going to do it sooner or later, you might as well do it sooner.
That's amazing. And I know, you know, for myself, finding it took me years to kind of isolate what that meant, the journaling and what was working for me. You know, and it's very different for me. It's a real hodgepodge. It depends on the day. It depends on the experience. I do love writing down my my asks, my prayers to a higher power, to source, and then, you know, dating those, and then in meditation, asking for answers, wisdom, and or as time goes by, seeing how those are answered, and just kind of realizing, developing a trust in the knowing, the higher knowing of which we're all a part, of which we're all connected, the knowing that beats all of our hearts, right? Is a big part of what helped me find a spiritual connection I could trust, which is a great idea for a whole separate episode. The spiritual connection you can trust, because when you're first looking, you doubt, you're afraid, you're like, I'm sure I'm on the wrong track. Am I just talking to myself? Am I making this up? You know, so finding a useful tool with your journal is absolutely wonderful. And it doesn't have to be, some people write 10 pages a day. Some people write one sentence, but just do something is a really great way to connect.
Yeah, and also keeping that promise to yourself, right? Showing up saying, I don't have a lot to give today, but here I am. And I'm going to say, today was really hard. I can't wait for tomorrow to start over. That's all you have to do. But so often we get lost in the expectations of others and achieving things for others. And that's not what it's about. It's about finding what works for you, because when you are living authentically and you are doing the work you need to do, that by proxy inspires others to do the same. And then we collectively heal this wound that we have in society right now, where we think we need to fit in other people's boxes. But it's not going to take, I can't sit here and tell you both to go live authentically if I'm not doing the same thing. Then you wouldn't trust me and you wouldn't connect with me and you wouldn't see me. So it really just is about taking responsibility for our own journey and saying, I don't care what anyone else is doing. This means the most to me because it's about me.
I love that. I love that so much. Wow. And we're basically out of time already. I can't believe how fast that went. But Roger, can you read her quote one more time? Because we'd love to bookend with the quote. And I just love this one.
Sam's advice to us is to let go or be dragged.
And that is from what was it, from a Zen?
It's a Zen proverb.
Yes. A Zen proverb. Let go or be dragged. And yes, so the mind will drag you. So learning ways to let go. And goodness, well, I hope you'll come back again, Sam, because there's so many things. It's always such a treat talking to you, and just feel like we could talk to forever about so many things. Yes. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in and watching. You can like the show and subscribe on USA Global Network or whatever platform you are watching or listening on today. And yes, any final word, Sam, for anyone who's feeling kind of spiritually homeless and is in that process of seeking?
Allow the seeking to happen however that looks. Let go of the idea that it has to look a certain way, and take it a day at a time. You don't have to have it all figured out right now. You don't have to have your life plan. And also, you're allowed to change your mind. That's probably the biggest piece of advice. You are allowed to change your mind.
I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you, Samantha. Thank you, Roger. And we will see you all again next week. Please tune in at 12 Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific on Wednesdays. We'll see you then. Bye.
Bye.